Hi, do monkeys interest you? Because if they do, that's too damn bad. We're not talking about any monkeys in this video. We're talking about apes, alright? No monkey business. Now, for those of you who are unaware of what the Gombe War is, well, that's what we're going to be talking about in this video. To give a brief overview before we actually get into the real deeds, essentially what it was between the years of 1974 and 1978, a long and grisly conflict between two factions of chimps. It was documented in Tanzania's Gombe National Park. Now, before we can get into the interesting things, like the battle, we have to establish a bit of a backstory as to why something like this would happen. Now, in the early 1970s, both anthropologists and primatologists were doing a lot of research on chimps. The reason behind this was to research not only the chimps' ancestors, but our ancestors as well, because share common ancestors. Now, that doesn't mean that we evolved from chimps. It more or less means that we evolved from the same creature and somehow gave us the ability to do incredible things such as making fire, utilizing tools, and of course, the greatest thing that humanity has ever done, putting Ninja into Fortnite. Now, whereas we're doing such amazing things as that, chimps are kind of doing very similar things to us. They're just kind of throwing their shit at each other and going to war, so that's pretty cool. I'm pretty sure the local homeless population around my area has been doing the same thing, so hey, that's neat. Now, one of the researchers there at this time was a relatively unknown Jane Goodall. And for those of you who aren't aware of who Jane Goodall is, now she is one of, if not the most influential person we have on understanding chimps and their behaviors. So, like I said, at this time she was a relatively unknown student, but she eventually became like super chimp understand lady, which is cool. So what were these researchers doing? Well, what they were trying to do is understand the chimp's way of life. What they would do is they would follow them around, take notes, and it's actually really cool. They had this big spreadsheet, and no matter what the chimp did, if it took a bite of fruit, if it threw around a stick, if it climbed up a tree, if it fought with another one, if it interacted with another one, the researcher would always write this down. Now, this is really cool, because not only are you able to go and say, hey, I want to know what X chimp was doing on January 3rd, 1984, you're also able to wonder, I wonder what this chimp was doing on September 11th, 2001. I don't know, I'm sure whatever it is, he'd never forget. Now, they're not exactly just in the forest with a bag full of bananas, just handing them out to the apes, oh, here you go, Peanut, and you got them, they're not doing that. They've got this booth set up to where they can make these transactions with the ape, which this banana booth is important, so remember that. You will be quizzed later. Now, as mentioned before, the war took place between 1974 and 1978. Now, the reason I call it a war is because it sounds a lot cooler, and it is kind of similar to a war, but a lot of researchers don't actually consider it a war. But, according to Jane, it was closer to a fight for both political power and resources, rather than just two drunk guys outside of a bar beating the absolute shit out of each other. So, I mean, to me, most of the wars that I know of were either for political power or resources. And of course, religion. But I don't really think the chimps are going on crusades, at least not yet, so. Now, as I had mentioned before, this war took place in Tanzania's Gombe National Park, and it essentially made up. Okay, this is really hard. I wonder if I have like a whiteboard or something like that. That would make this a hell of a lot easier to convey. I'm gonna go look for a whiteboard. Hold on. Good news. I found a whiteboard. The bad news is one of us is gonna have to draw on it, so why are you looking at me? Alright, so I'm sure all of you are appreciating my amazing artwork right now. So, essentially what I'm trying to do is recreate the Gombe National Forest. I'm sure all of you could tell by this naturally, though. So right here is the forest. Over there, there's a lake right there. But essentially, what I, like I said, tried to replicate is the Gombe National Forest. Now, I'm going to try and pronounce these as best as possible, but I'm a white guy who grew up in Michigan. I don't exactly have much experience saying all these crazy names. So, up in the north, we have the Matumbe. Down south, we have the Kalande. And of course, the one in the middle, the one that we will be taking the interest in the most today, is the Kasakela. Now, the Kasakela right there is a group that Jane Goodall actually spent a majority of her time researching and following and documenting. as I had mentioned before. Now, Casa Kela is also where Jane Goodall had those feeding stations set up that I had mentioned earlier, where they would hand out the bananas, and that of course allowed her to get closer with the chimps, form a better bond, and research and understand them more. And because she was so close to these chimps, it made the resulting war and deaths that had occurred from that so much worse. Now, before we get into the bloodshed, I do think it's important to go over chimps' behavior and how they act as a species. So I've kind of drawn out, like I had mentioned before, the territories, but these each individual acts are supposed to represent the chimps. Now, there are many more chimps than this in the actual Gombe National Forest, but I've kind of just simpled it down. Now, unlike most animals within their own territory, they don't all stay together in one giant group. Now, depending on the size of the tribe and the territory, there could be anywhere from 20 to over 100 chimps in this one territory. So they don't all just sit around one central tree. They usually tend to break off into smaller groups, as depicted here by these X's that I so expertly drew. Now, one thing that chimps do have in common with a lot of animals is that there is an alpha, or a leader of the tribe. Now, usually the alpha is the strongest male, and with that position comes the control over the most territories, control over the most females, and you get the best food. So, you know, that classic Andrew Tate W shit. Now, the reason they usually break off into these groups is for resource management. Rather it be to go out and find new resources, or to go gather some berries and nuts, or even go hunting, which the chimps actually have been seen in documenting hunting other monkeys and killing them and eating them, obviously. Now, another thing that they would do in these groups is create patrolling parties, which I'm sure you'll never guess what they did. Patrol! So essentially what would happen is a group of males would get together and they would go around and patrol their territory. Now, during patrol, if they were to see a chimp from a rival territory in their territory, they'd be known to chase him off, get him out of their territory, and sometimes, during rare circumstances, even attack. And depending on the number of chimps on both the attacking and defending side, sometimes even kill. Alright, so let's establish some world building. So, now at one point, Mike was the alpha of the tribe, but eventually he stopped being the alpha. Now, Mike no longer being alpha led to a power vacuum, which essentially led to two groups, or three chimps, battling to become alpha. The first group being Hugh and Charlie. Now, Charlie was the one who wanted to be alpha, but he had the support of his older brother Hugh. Now, the other contender for alpha was Humphrey. And this is where things start to get a little confusing, because what Hugh and Charlie would do is they would charge at Humphrey and scare him away. Now, normally when the chimps would do this to try and figure out who the alpha male is, it would just be a one-on-one situation, not a two-on-one. So if Charlie was to charge up on Humphrey by himself, and Humphrey were to run away, what he would normally do is he would make some type of sound that signifies he's submitting to Charlie. Now, obviously, if Humphrey were to submit to Charlie, that would make Charlie the alpha. But because both of them ran up on Humphrey, rather than just Charlie in particular, that was seen more as an attack rather than an actual bid for alpha. So obviously, this caused some conflict, and it caused Hugh and Charlie, along with a group of their friends, to start heading, well, they head south here. Oh, it didn't come out. They head south here. But on here we'll go drawing south here. Like I said, they go down south with a group of their friends, including somebody very important that I'm going to circle right here, named Goliath. Now, Goliath himself is actually pretty cool. Now, Goliath is an older chimp and actually a former alpha of the tribe. He was actually the one who brought some of the first attention to the Gombe National Park when Jane Goodall, doing her research, saw him using tools. One of the first ever chimpanzees to be seen, to be documented using tools. So yeah, so these guys head south, and Humphrey and his friends stay up north. Now, one thing that the researchers started to notice is that Hugh, Charlie, and his friends down south started only grooming each other and didn't really like associating with Humphrey and his group up north. And eventually their group even stopped coming to the feeding station. So this was becoming a very big deal, at least in the chimp world. Now, after the researchers saw that this group clearly is no longer a part of this greater group, they gave them a new name, known as the Kahoma group. And I'll just circle this right here. Now, by 1972, it became very obvious to researchers that this southern group had completely left the original group and became something of their own. Now, the researchers decided to name them the Kahoma group. Now, this circle right here is essentially what their territory was. It was just the southern end of where they had essentially already existed at. So, these guys right here were located right there. And Humphrey and his group was located up near the north, but they essentially had all this territory in their control. Now, for a while, they seemed to not necessarily live in harmony with each other, but at least coexist with each other for a while. That was until January of 1974, which kickstarts the event of what this video is based off of. So we will get into that right now. Here we have my amazing art piece of, not all of them, but really the big players of the battle. In purple we have the Kasakela, and in this beautiful brown color we have the Kama. The first major attack that happened was on Godi, who was attacked by a group from the Kasakela tribe, and was seen one day by the researchers after the attack, but after never seen from again, and is presumed dead. Consisting of Jomo, Everett, and Sherry all the way over here attack Day. And now Day was attacked for about 10 minutes from these three chimps, which I don't know if you guys have ever seen a chimp, but they're terrifying and jacked, so that would not be fun. He was later found about 3 months later, severely dehydrated, injured, and emaciated from the fight. And shortly after those 3 months, they were never seen from again, so presumed dead. Now, these two attacks were shocking on their own, but the third one is what really shocked the researchers. They didn't attack just a random chimp. They actually went after Goliath. Now, the weird thing about Goliath is it's not entirely known why he separated. Now, like for Charlie and Hugh, the main reason was because they didn't get along with Humphrey, and they didn't like the fact that he was alpha. Like I said before, Goliath was a former alpha, and it was weird for an older ape such as himself to leave the group, because younger apes would want to challenge for the spot. Goliath already had that. It's weird. They don't really know why he did. Now, Goliath's attack actually happened a full year after Godi, so they're a year into this battle. This is in 1975 in February. Now, the raiding party that attacked Goliath consisted of Hameo, Fabian, Figgin, Satan, and of course, ya boy, Humphrey, the leader. Now, this battle was especially brutal. So Fabian had got to him first and had pinned him down. That's when Humphrey, along with the rest of the group, arrived. During this time, Humphrey, Figgin, and Satan all started jumping on Goliath's body. Again, these are big-ass chimps. Huge, muscular beasts just stomping the shit out of you. That's not gonna feel good. Along with the stomping, they also beat the shit out of them with their fists. Some of them even full-on lifted them off the ground and fucking Batista bombed them. It's insane. I'm just kidding. They didn't actually Batista bomb them, but they like lifted them up and just fucking BOW! It's crazy. They're going straight WWE in this shit. Now, during this beating, Fabian actually took Goliath's legs, grabs a hold of it, and starts spinning it round and around and around, which is one thing that they do to the monkeys that they hunt in a way to like detach it and rip it off and eat it. Now remember, Goliath is an older male. He's not some young in his prime chimp. And even then, that would be an extreme beating for a male in his prime. But he is an old man. So they're just beating the shit out of an elder. So, shocker, after this event, Goliath was never seen or heard from again. After this came the first female casualty. Another fairly old chimp, Madam B, who was the mother to both Little Bee and Honeybee. Now, these three were not strangers to raiding parties from the Kasakela group. They had seen them and interacted with them before and gotten swatted off, and sometimes even attacked during some of their scuffles, but it had never gone this far. Now, something really weird actually happened after one of the attacks on Madam B and her daughters, Little Bee and Honeybee. Now, after the attack had happened, her oldest daughter, Little Bee, had actually followed the attacking group back all the way to Kasakela and actually started hanging out with them and even joined them on some of their patrolling parties, essentially becoming a traitor. Now, over the next few months, Madam B was seen by researchers to be attacked at least 4 times. She was often also seen with fresh new wounds. Now, the attack in the fall of 1975 actually shocked researchers a lot. Like I had mentioned before, it brought the death of Madam B. The thing that surprised researchers is that Little B was actually able to join back into the Kasakela party. They thought that Madam B would be able to do the same thing, but no, something completely unexpected happened. Researchers weren't able to see the whole scene, but what they stumbled upon was Sherry, Hameo, Satan, and Figgin all jumping Madam B. And watching from the sidelines of the battle was Little B, meaning that she watched as her companions that she chose to join beat the ever-living shit out of her mom. At one point, the researchers had observed that the attacking party eventually tried leaving, only to observe Madam B try and stand up. which caused the attacking party to rush back and continue to beat the shit out of her. And this happened over and over again by Figgin and Satan. After that, Madam B had left, and researchers spent 2 days looking for her, only to find her being cared for by her daughter, Honeybee, in very, very critical condition, only for her to eventually pass away, again under the care of her daughter, Honeybee. Now, Honeybee did survive the war and eventually went back to Casacala after things had settled down. Now, the next attack is unknown what had happened, but it's reported that fishermen had overheard chimps screaming in the forest. 3 days after that, the body of Charlie was found. Now, Charlie's brother Hugh had vanished a few years earlier, and it's unknown if he was taken out by the Casacala or some other cause, but for the hell of it, we're going to say he was killed by the Casacala. Another male named Willy Wally had also disappeared shortly after Charlie's death. So he is X'd out as well. Now, the final confirmed attack was on Sniff, the youngest of the apes. Now, Figgin, Goblin, and Satan were the first to get to him. In their excited battle cries, called in Sherry, Everett, and Homeo. Now, during this attack, obviously Sniff was severely wounded, and researchers watched in horror as while Sniff was being attacked, Satan drank blood from his bleeding face. Yeah. After that, Satan, the asshole who drank his blood, and Sherry then took poor little Sniff and dragged him all across the ground, and the beating continued on for minutes after that. Now, surprisingly, researchers saw Sniff a day after this attack, but he was never seen again after. So, I think it's safe to assume that Sniff didn't make it. Now, unlike Little Bee and Honeybee, who I had said before joined back with Casacala after this whole shebango, Wanda and Mandy were never seen from again. It's unknown what happened, and most likely they were killed by a raiding party. Because they were never seen from again, never joined back with Casacala, never joined any of the surrounding tribes. At least they were never seen to join it. So, again, I think it's just safe to assume that they are no longer alive. So, as you can see, this is quite the bloody conflict. You don't really want to fuck with chimps. So, like I had said before, Honeybee and Little Bee are still alive, but everybody else is dead. Or never seen from again. These two are still alive. But that essentially leaves the Kama group to essentially be taken out completely. And with them being removed, that actually had some unintended consequences. Now, after that bloodshed, it had taken out their territory entirely, obviously, because there's none of them left, which led the Casacalas to have their territory back as a whole again. But in killing their friends, it destroyed the buffer between these two territories. Now, with the buffer zone gone between Casacala and Kalande, and Casacala being weak from having previous battles, Kalande actually took it as an opportunity to expand their territory. They took it very, very far into Casacala. So, I mean, this shit's pretty crazy. And during their conflicts, 2 Casacala chimps were actually killed, one of them being Humphrey. So that's unfortunate or fortunate, depending on whose side you were rooting for. Now, while they were expanding, the Casacala had actually started to go north where the Matumba tribe was located. Now, the Matumba tribe was very, very strong, had a lot of chimps, and 100% could have wiped out the Casacala tribe if they wanted to. Luckily, they were gracious or just didn't really give a shit and let them live. Now, over time, things did eventually balance out and get normal, but there's still forever going to be a bloody stain on that part of the chimps' history. Now, what did we learn from this? Well, we learned a lot about Chimp War. The word war is actually kind of controversial when it comes to this whole topic, as I had mentioned before. Someone like Jane Goodall would consider it to be war, while others would say we are using an extreme level of anthropomorphism, which is essentially giving human qualities to something that shows no human qualities. But the question is it really anthropomorphic? I mean, in my completely uneducated opinion, I don't really think so. Because if you think about it, in the early days of human history, think caveman times, if we had evidence that there were these 2 tribes that went to battle against each other constantly over resources and territory, I think we would consider that a war. And that is essentially what these chimps are doing. It's just
they have a hell of a lot more hair than us. I mean, obviously there's a few other things, but you know, that's the main difference. Now, where this differed from most chimp conflicts is, while it's not uncommon to see chimps fight with other groups for territory, what was really weird about this is they were formerly one group and separated. Now, in my research, there are basically 3 schools of thought that would explain as to why this happened. Now, the first one is that Hugh, Charlie, and Humphrey were the catalyst that kind of set everything off. Those 3 fighting for the alpha position is what eventually snowballed into what happened. Now, the other cause is something a little bit more provocative, I guess you could say. And it's essentially that chimps, when they are ready to mate and ready to have babies, they, at least females, have a very obvious sign, and it's their ass gets all red. And when that happens, it shows the males, hey, I'm ready to have your baby. Well, it just so happened that at this time in Kasakela, that there was a shit ton of males and not a lot of females, and that the females that were there had either just had a kid or were too old to have kids, so there wasn't exactly a whole lot of breeding going on, and there was a whole lot of males who were looking to breed. So obviously with that happening, hormones are flying, testosterone through the roof. I mean, again, I don't know how much I can stress this. Have you guys seen fucking chimps and how just terrifying they are? Those, like, they're just these shredded, they're scary. They are scary as shit. And just imagining a really horny, angry one of those charging at you. Oh my God. Oh my God. That's the worst thing ever. Now, the third school of thought is because of the banana booth that I had mentioned earlier. Remember I said there'd be a quiz on it. This is where it comes in. What happened there? That's right, they handed out bananas to chimps. Now, what people believed is Kasakela actually wasn't always one group. It had always been 2, and that just this temporary alliance had occurred so that way everybody could reach the banana station. But the thing that kind of destroys this theory is the fact that Goliath was formerly an alpha at Kasakela, which wouldn't really make sense as to why he then became the alpha in the other group, you know, so that one just kind of falls apart, but it is still something interesting to think about, that the bananas could be the reason this happens, although it's most likely not. You know, and as of today, the Gombe chimps are doing great, you know, chimping around, living life, enjoying bananas probably, I don't really know. There hasn't really been any major battles in the Gombe region, at least chimp-wise, since the 1970s, so they're doing pretty good. Yeah, and that pretty much brings us to the end of the video. Hopefully you enjoyed and learned a lot. I sure know I did while researching this. I mean, this world's so fucking weird, and I've got a lot more weird stories to talk about. So if you like this video and want to stick around for more, subscribe, like, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And yeah, so I guess, why don't you have a great rest of your life. Thank you.